Good day, everyone. Welcome to Tibag High School, Senior High School Department, under the Technical Vocational Livelihood Track and Home Economics strand. We have the subject Bread and Pastry Production, NC2. We have Quarter 1 and Week 1. Our lesson for today is to prepare and produce these foods. Again, I am Sanchez, your accredited competency assessor for bread and pastry production NC2 at Tibag High School. Our lesson comprises the following topics. We have the baking ingredients and its function, what are the desirable product characteristics of baked goods or bakery products, and correct oven temperature. Let us proceed. Our assessment for this lesson will include oral questioning or interview, written questions in form of quizzes and assignments, work projects that is project-based or output-based, workplace observation of practical skills, practical exercises, and an e-portfolio which includes pictures and documentations, videos, and your reflection. Our performance criteria is based on our learning competency, and those are selected, measured, and weighed required ingredients according to recipe and production requirements, prepared a variety of bakery products to desirable product characteristics, produce a variety of foods or yeast foods according to standardized recipes and enterprise standards, used appropriate equipment to prepare and bake these foods. Also, we have to use correct techniques to produce these foods to enterprise standards, bake these foods to enterprise requirements and standards, select correct oven conditions for baking these foods. For our overview, baking is actually cooking by dry heat cooking, and it is using an oven or an oven-type appliance. It is a method of cooking used in making breads, cakes, pies, and pastries, which everybody enjoys eating. Baking is an enjoyable activity in which you will learn either as a hobby or as an income-generating project. This module will help you to learn the different bakery products and provide you hands-on experience in baking. Let us start. But before we go on, let's have our pre-quiz. Check on the link provided to answer the pre-quiz. Let us check what you already knew about bread and pastry production. Take note that if you have a pre-test, you will also have a post-test. Let's have the ingredients. What are the ingredients that we use in baking? Basically, we have flour. For the flour, we have three kinds of flour. We have the first class flour, which we use in baking breads. We have the cake flour, which we use in baking cakes, and an all-purpose flour. An all-purpose flour, from the term all-purpose, can be used in making breads and baking cakes as well. They are different somehow in terms of price and in terms of gluten content. When you say gluten content, that's the protein element responsible for the elasticity of the dough. Okay, so for the cake flour, it contains about 9 to 11% gluten. An all-purpose flour contains about 11 to 12% gluten. And for the first class, or the bread flour, it contains about 12 to 14% of gluten. That is why you cannot use a cake flour in making breads. And the same is true that you cannot use a first class flour in making your cakes. An all-purpose flour is somehow in the middle. in which you can use for breads and cakes as well, especially those of the creaming method or the one that uses creaming method. You have the butter cake or you can have the chocolate cake, or you can have the banana cake or the carrot cake. For breads, you can also use it in pandesal and other baked products or bakery products such as ensaymada, cinnamon rolls, cheese rolls, and others. The elements of flour contain starch, protein, sugar, moisture, fats, and enzymes. The starch element of flour is responsible for this thickness that we say. So when you make your sauces or you prepare your sauces, you can make use of flour. Actually, we have the so-called rule in which there is a 1:1 ratio. You have 1 tablespoon or 1 cup of flour to 1 cup of butter to prepare your sauces and your soup. Do you know that flour also contains protein? Yes, that's what I mentioned earlier, that's the gluten content. Of course, it contains sugar as well. That is why our flour is a carbohydrate or a source of carbohydrate. Flour is actually coming from wheat and it is imported. We do not have any wheat here in the Philippines. Sugar. Yes, it contains sugar, and that is another carbohydrate which is used in our body. It contains moisture, meaning it has moisture content, and it has also some fats and enzymes. Next ingredients will be the salt. Although we use salt at a minimum amount, our salt controls fermentation. It softens the gluten, stabilizing it, and it increases volume. It enhances the flavor and controls the dough. It increases the shelf life as well and improves rust color. However, take note that you should not combine your salt with your yeast. So you can add it at the last portion together with the flour mixture. Okay, so for the yeast, this is the one responsible for the fermentation of your baked product. We are going to use the instant dry yeast. We have the brand name that is SAP, no? Okay, so we have a compressed yeast, that's one in the picture. We have a dry yeast, that's what you call the Red Star at the grocery stores, and the cream or liquid. So we are going to use, because of the technology, we are going to use an instant dry yeast. Water is responsible for the gluten formation of proteins. It hydrates the gluten-forming proteins. Without water, you cannot have any baked product if it is the flour alone. Of course, without flour, you do not also have any baked product, because the flour is the one that forms the structure of your bread or baked products. Again, for water, it dissolves and disperses salt and sugar. So, tinutunaw niya yung ating sugar and the salt as well. It carries sugars to the yeast. Yes, sugar is the food for the yeast. And with water, it carries out the sugar to the yeast. Of course, it provides moisture for the yeast to grow. Sometimes, if you have experienced some time ago, you have the yeast into a lukewarm water, and then you wait until it bubbles. Okay? So, and then you add sugar, because sugar is the food for the yeast. So, that's the time it will bubble and it will rise, no? Meaning, buhay na siya. But now, we are going to use an instant dry yeast. If you don't need any lukewarm water, you just simply combine your instant dry yeast into the flour mixture. Yes, it hydrates dry yeast. Another function of water includes controlling dough temperature. It controls dough consistency. It wets and swells starch during baking. It controls enzymatic activity. and increases shelf life, and it contributes to eating qualities. It makes the food or the bread more flavorful, and it enhances the flavor of our bread. So you cannot imagine a bread without water. So it controls dough consistency. However, you cannot just add any amount of water in which you want. No? It has to be measured accurately. Of course, it increases shelf life. No, without water, again, you cannot have your bread. Fats. When we say fats, it is a generic term. When we say fats in baking, it includes oil, lard, butter, margarine, or the so-called shortening. Shortening is also known as the lard, the back fat of a hog. When you say oil, of course, we know what is an oil. You can have a palm oil, a corn oil, a vegetable oil, and this is in a liquid form. When you say butter, butter is like a margarine. However, they are different in the sense that butter is more expensive than margarine. It is lighter in color. Of course, this improves the texture of our bread and also adds to the flavor. Margarine is cheaper, but then we might have the misconception that margarine is the same as butter. Like we have the dairy cream, the butter fresh. No, we say that it is butter, but it is actually margarine when you read its label. So what we have for butter is we have the amount. So some thing like 100 pesos compared to 36 pesos to 50 pesos that in margarine. And then the shortening is best used, of course, for bread making. We use shortening or the lard, no, as our tenderizer. Okay, you cannot imagine the flour with water and then without any shortening you make a bread. Of course, that your product will be very tough. No? So matigas yung ating tinapay kung wala siyang fats, oil, butter, or margarine. Okay, let's proceed to the next one. Fats, it includes slicing. Ayun, pag mahirap siyang i-slice, kulang siya sa butter or margarine or oil. It adds to the softness of the crumb and it shortens eating the crumb and adds to the softer crust. It keeps better keeping qualities of the bread. It increases volume. It is emulsified fats retard crumbs and it also enhances fairness. Now, when you do the baking for the steps or procedures, the sequence of baking procedures, you added fats at the last part. No? Once you are kneading, you added it last. No? You do not combine it right away because that will delay the fermentation process. Sugar. Of course, sugar is also another carbohydrates, a form of carbohydrate, simple sugar. It softens the crumb. Of course, it adds sweetness to the product, and it increases crust and whiter crumb color. It increases level slacking or weaken the dough. It creates a greater water retention and better eating qualities. So, especially for those kids or the young ones, the yappies, they would prefer breads, which has a higher sugar content. Okay. Fats again for special ingredient functions. We have this flavor, as I mentioned earlier. Anchor butter, of course, will definitely do better than an ordinary margarine or something like butter fresh and dairy cream. It adds to the crumb texture and it also makes it adds to a longer life of the bread. Okay, for sugar, the proportion of sugar added usually on the product depends on the type of product, the amount of dried fruit used, and the side sweetness of the product. For example, we have cinnamon roll or ensaymada, which has for enchilada, you have the sugar toppings on top. So from the bread or dough itself, you lessen the sugar. And say for example, a dough for pandesal, it can be from 180 to 200 grams per 1,000 grams of flour. So we have the so-called baker's percentage, in which there is a formula that we have to follow. And of course, it adds to the desired sweetness of the product. Caster sugar is the best choice. Actually, for sugar, we have different kinds or market forms of sugar. Yes, that's one, the caster sugar. You have the brown sugar. You have the granulated white sugar. That's the caster. And then you also have the so-called confectioner sugar, which is basically used for icings and for frostings, no? And then we also have the lump sugar. We have the so-called panucha. And we also have the so-called the one that is used for diabetes or diabetics. So you have that kind of sugar which is not used for baking. Okay, so saccharine or something like, so you do not, that is not used for baking purposes. Okay, another ingredient is the milk powder. The effects of milk powder on breads is it adds to the brightness and softer crumbs. It of course it increases the natural or nutritional value and flavor of the bread, and then it adds a volume due to the strengthening of gluten strands in the case of protein. It has a slight sweetness due to lactose, so milk sugar. Actually, once I joined the competition, I forgot to bring the milk powder. I used the what do you call that? The powder milk, the buttermilk. No, I forgot to bring it, so I asked somebody to buy or bought me some milk. So that makes it better. Okay. So for the soft roll or the dinner roll, eggs. Eggs is somehow, of course, it's a liquid ingredient which adds to the moistness of the product. It has an enriching effect due to the fat in the yolk, and of course the nutritional value. Okay, so it serves as a protein source. It also acts as an emulsifying due to lessening the yolk, therefore keeping its better qualities. Aid structure due to the proteins, better color and appearance, better eating qualities, and better cooking. Okay, let's proceed to the correct techniques to produce these goods. So the key requirements or the tips, no, that you have in your learning activity sheets. If you have read your learning activity sheets, you have the correct weights of ingredients, accurate measurement of ingredients. Everything starts with an accurate measurement. Even if you have the best ingredients, you have the imported ingredients, but you do not have the correct weights or measurements, you cannot have a better result. So formula balance is used, which we will be using or learning next time. You have the baker's percentage, and then bakery products are consistent, of course, when formula balance is maintained. Scaling weights accurately, mixing the dough or the batter the same every time, so sabay-sabay siya. Although we have the so-called the sponge method for bread, na yung kalahati ay sinaseparate and then you mix it together at a time, no? So yun namang sponge method is also good because it the bread has a better eating qualities and a longer shelf life. Okay, cutting or weighing to correct size. So if say you have 1 kilo, that will be about 1,800 kilogram when you add your water, when you add your egg, when you add your sugar, and the rest of the ingredients. You have to cut it equally. If you want 25 grams of water, 25 grams of your dough, you weigh it one by one. Okay, so that you will be able to have or you will be able to do the posting well. So you have to mold it to correct shape. That's the so-called rounding and baking the same every time. So we will wait until the dough is has doubled in size, no, before you put it in the oven. And take note, you have to keep your oven set, no. So when you read the recipe, it starts with set the oven temperature at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 175 degrees Celsius. You always keep the oven has a steady heat so that the product will be best enough, no, when you are cooking. Okay, so what are the good product characteristics? Product characteristics for bread includes the color, no? So that one that you see in the picture, it has a golden brown color. It is not dark, no, it's not maitim or sunog. So the appearance, no, it stands well, no. Sa pandesal, it is so-called parang kwelyo. So when you do the rounding, makikita mo yun, nakatayo yung bread. Hindi siya parang bumuka or nakaplat. So it has a good appearance. It is consistent. The texture, of course, it has the moisture content, no. When you bite it, it is soft. And then meron siyang, when you open the bread, it has the moisture content. The water is the moisture content. That's the fast food and then the mouth. So we have the activity wherein you are going to visit or check it out on your local stores or paniterias about this trend and check on the desirable price. So you have the whole breads in your paniteria, you have the pandesal, of course, the Spanish bread, you have the star bread or the coco, you have this donut, and one of the products that we have seen is a donut. I understand that all do not have the oven, but at least somehow we can still prepare without an oven. And what else? Aside from pandesal, we also have the tutok I mentioned na, and then sometimes they have these buns, no? You can also check on that and check the desirable product characteristics. Okay, what is the correct oven temperature? When you say correct oven temperature, that should be the range of oven temperature that you use when you do the heating. It can be in Celsius or in Fahrenheit. Now, 180 degrees Celsius will be about 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And 220 degrees Celsius is too high. That's about 400 degrees Fahrenheit. There are breads, there are bakery products like the cream puff, which requires a high temperature for the first few minutes, no? So say for example, the cream puff or the choux paste, it requires 400 degrees Fahrenheit for the first 15 minutes. And then afterwards, you lessen it. So the best temperature that we can have is 160 to 175 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean Celsius, or that is equivalent to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So our products will be safe, no? Hindi siya masusunog. And always take note, you have to preheat your oven. It should have a steady heat before you place your pans inside the oven. Products baked with sugar will darken on the crust quicker than bread. And to control the browning of the crust, the product is baked at a lower temperature. So, kahit mahina, at least hindi siya ganun madaling maluto at hindi siya masusunog. Pero importante na steady heat or it has reached, no, the required temperature before we place it in the oven. So that's one question that will be asked during your assessment or the national assessment. Why do you have to preheat the oven? You have to preheat the oven to attain the desired temperature. Okay, so 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 175 degrees Celsius. Your learning activity sheets, no? So you have to answer this, and you have it in a one whole sheet of yellow paper. So the activity one is included in your learning activity sheets. You may answer in a separate sheet of yellow paper. So you will find this one in your modules or activity sheets. And you also have other activities that you can find in there. But our video lesson or our next video lesson will cover the rest of the topic. So now let's proceed to the post test. You can proceed to the post test. I have the same link, no? Actually, what you have for the pre-test will be the same as to your post test. And also, do not forget to make your reflection as stated again in your learning activity sheets. Okay? Thank you and have a great day. Thank you.